So what is the North American Union, or as it's also called, deep integration?
Deep integration is it started off simply as an initiative by the Business Council on National Issues, now called the Canadian Council of Chief Executives, which is the 150 largest corporations in Canada. They started off in about 2002, pushing for the total, really, assimilation of Canada into the U.S. It's called deep integration, which means that you would integrate not only the economy, which NAFTA already does, but you would integrate virtually every other major policy area. Defense, for example, foreign policy, social policy, energy, the export of bulk water, all these things are part of the deep integration agenda. And it is now part of a formal agreement between the United States, Canada, and Mexico called the Security and Prosperity Partnership of North America. And it is being implemented as we speak. There are 12 cabinet-level committees working to harmonize regulations and laws across the three borders. So all of this is happening, and the vast majority, I'd say that probably 90% of Canadians don't even know it's happening, but it is being put in place, and it is being put in place by stealth. In fact, they actually, in a document that was recently released, actually used that word, do it by stealth. And one of the corporate leaders from the United States, from Lockheed Martin, said, we're going to do most of this without any legislation, because if we use legislation, people will oppose it. Canada can't survive in the sense that, I mean, as a nation that in the post-war period developed a unique sort of social contract and a set of social programs and policies at the federal and provincial level that reflect a set of values. All of that would disappear, because when you integrate with a country as large and as powerful as the United States, they don't integrate towards you. They don't harmonize towards your values and your laws and your social programs. You harmonize towards them because they're 10 times, 20 times as big and much more powerful militarily. So Canada will not survive if this program is implemented over the next 10 years as is planned. It can't survive. We would become essentially an appendage of the United States. Most of the important decisions about the kinds of things that matter to Canadians would not be made in Canada. They would essentially be made in the United States.
Should we be talking about Canada and the United States, or corporate Canada and corporate America?
Well, certainly this agenda is completely driven by the corporate elite in both countries, but the political elite is also on side. It's driven in Canada in part because NAFTA was a big experiment for Canadian corporations. Many corporate leaders felt if we had NAFTA, then Canadian corporations would be forced to compete, pull up their socks, do more innovative research and technology, and compete with American corporations. Well, what has happened is they haven't been able to. There's been a massive failure on the part of Canadian corporations to compete effectively with American corporations, in part because American corporations are so much larger. So, you know, the quick explanation is if you can't beat them, join them. They see, you know, every day buyouts of Canadian companies, huge Canadian companies are disappearing. So one of the ways of trying to deal with this is to integrate even further into the United States. The Canadian corporate elite supports deep integration because it is in their interest as corporations to do so. They see, after 9/11 in particular, the terrorist attacks, they experienced what it was like to have the borders closed for a few days. And so they are terrified that, you know, another terrorist attack in the United States might close the border again. And so essentially the deal that Canadian corporations have put on the table with the U.S. is we will support all of your foreign policy, your anti-terrorist policy. We'll harmonize our immigration and refugee policy if, in return, we get access to your economy. So we are essentially trading what Canada has become over the last 50 to 60 years for guaranteed access to Canadian corporations to the American market.
Who opposes the North American Union?
Well, right now, because so few people know about it, there aren't a lot of groups opposing it. Certainly the Council of Canadians which was formed to fight the Free Trade Agreement in the 1980s. The Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives is a research organization. It's done a great deal of research on deep integration. So those are the two principal organizations. But I think that, as Canadians find out about it, I think that the vast majority of Canadians would oppose it simply because they don't want to be Americans. And if you look at the values polling that's done in Canada, really in-depth values, we are a very different place in the United States, and Canadians value their differences.
It's widely opposed in the United States as well, both in Congress and outside of Congress.
Well, it's interesting. That's right. I think in part because the United States is an empire. It has a very patriotic population. It views its sovereignty as extremely important, and so any hint amongst many Americans that they're going to lose sovereignty gets them extremely upset. Whereas in Canada, the notion that we would lose sovereignty, especially given that the media is so corporate controlled, we simply don't get that message out to Canadians.
What are the benefits to Canada or Canadians?
Well, the benefits, if you look at the benefits we were supposed to get from free trade, they've been very ephemeral. We lost almost 300,000 high-paying industrial jobs that never returned. They were replaced by jobs that were lower paying and with fewer benefits. We have lost control of our energy completely. We now are obliged by NAFTA to keep selling the same percentage of our oil and gas to the United States as we are now selling. We have not got guaranteed access to the American market. The softwood lumber deal is a good example of that. So, and that was what we were supposed to get. We gave all these other things away: control over our energy, our industrial jobs, control over foreign investment. We gave all those things up in order to get guaranteed access to the U.S. market, and we didn't get that. So this is, if NAFTA failed, this is NAFTA on a gargantuan scale. And if NAFTA failed, you can be pretty sure that this will fail as well, and we'll end up losing much more.
What are the dangers to Canada and Canadians?
Well, the danger is that we will lose our ability to determine our own direction as a nation. That's the biggest loss, and you can under that category you can imagine 1,000 things. We simply will have no capacity to determine the direction of our country. Both parties are, in my view, are equally committed to this. I have seen no sign so far under Dion that that he's ever commented on it, but certainly he was part of the cabinet when the deal was signed, and I've heard nothing from him on economic policy that would suggest that he opposes it. So, as far as we know right now, both the major political parties are committed to this process.
Can you say that again, just saying both the Liberals and the...
Both the Liberals and the Conservatives are completely committed to this process of deep integration.
Two more questions. You mentioned common energy policy, common water policy. What does that mean, energy, for example?
What it means is that Canada becomes a secure supplier of energy for the United States. And so we already have NAFTA. Proportional sharing means that we can't cut back. I mean, if all of a sudden we have an energy shortage, we still have to send the same percentage of our oil and gas to the United States, even if it means shutting down factories or stopping gas flow to residences. So that's already in place. What's happening now is that the same thing is being planned for electricity. For example, BC Hydro is restructuring to become an energy exporter rather than a company that primarily provides electricity to British Columbia consumers. This is happening in other provinces as well. And the whole area of the bulk transfer of water to the United States, which will soon be if it's not already, in a water crisis. So those are two huge areas that are certainly coming down the road in terms of this new agreement.
There's a heads of state meeting in June of 2007. Can you comment on that?
Well, this is the third summit between the three NAFTA leaders. The first one was in 2005 when they first signed the Security and Prosperity Partnership. That was in Texas. Last year it was held in Cancun. This year it's going to be held in Kananaskis. And it's just, it's another photo op, but it also reinforces this, the legitimacy of this agreement, which, by the way, has never been debated in Parliament, has never been passed in legislation. It is simply an agreement signed between three government leaders, and it's never seen the light of day in the House of Commons. What they're trying to do now is to do as much as they can in the area of regulation that doesn't require legislation. And then down the road, certain things would clearly require legislation, but they're hoping that by then Canadians have been sold on it.
Is there any hope from the NDP to oppose it?
The NDP is opposing it, and the NDP has brought it up in the House of Commons, but of course it's a small party, and you have a corporate media that chooses the stories, and this is a story that so far they haven't chosen.